All right, so let's jump into this crazy NBA season, huh? You saw what happened with Victor Wembanyama, right?
Oh, yeah.
The guy was having a ridiculous rookie year with the Spurs.
Out of this world.
Looked like a lock for MVP Defensive Player of the Year, and
Yeah.
then boom, season-ending blood clot in his shoulder. I know it's tough, especially if you're a Spurs fan.
Brutal.
But stick with us because there's a ton more to talk about this season, even beyond Wembanyama.
It's true. This season has been anything but predictable. Wembanyama's injury is a massive blow for sure, but it could actually set the stage for something really special. Kind of like what happened back in '97 with the Spurs. We'll get to that a little later, though.
Okay, now I'm really curious, but first, let's break down the Wembanyama situation. He was averaging, what was it, like 28 points, 14 rebounds, 4 blocks a game?
Something like that.
Just absurd for a rookie. I mean, he was already the anchor of their defense.
Absolutely. He was trying at an MVP level, no question. And it really looked like the Spurs had found their franchise cornerstone. They even traded for De'Aaron Fox to pair with him.
Yeah.
So for him to go down like this, it's a major setback for the Spurs, for the entire league, actually.
You know, it's interesting. Before the season, everyone was saying that the new CBA, you know, the collective bargaining agreement,
Right.
was going to make it almost impossible for teams to make these big trades.
Yeah.
But then we saw Luka Doncic end up with the Lakers' Jimmy Butler going to the Warriors, and the Spurs, of course, getting De'Aaron Fox.
Huge move.
What's going on here? I thought these new rules were meant to stop these mega deals.
Well, they've definitely made it more complicated, especially with this new thing called the second apron.
The what?
The second apron, basically it's a new level of the salary cap, and it comes with some pretty harsh penalties for teams to go over it.
Okay.
It's designed to stop those super teams from forming, but teams are finding ways to get around it, like using third-team deals to move salaries around and assets.
So it's less about stopping trades altogether and more about making teams get creative.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to fit a bunch of different shaped blocks into a box.
Okay.
The new CBA is like making the box smaller and a lot more complex. But teams are finding ways to rotate those blocks, use different combos to make everything fit.
Gotcha. So are some teams struggling more with these new rules than others?
Oh, absolutely. Teams that were already over the cap, like the Suns and the Celtics,
Right.
they're finding it really hard to make any moves at all. They keep hitting that second apron, and they're facing some serious financial consequences.
Ouch.
But then you've got the teams that have been managing their cap space well, like the Lakers and the Bucks.
Yeah.
They're in a much better position to make deals.
So it's almost like the CBA is creating like a have and have-nots situation, even beyond just, who has the best players.
You got it. And it's shaking things up because now you have these younger teams like the Thunder and the Grizzlies who, haven't been big spenders in the past. And now they're suddenly looking like contenders.
That's true.
They built through the draft, developed their young players, and they're not stuck in cap hell like some of these older teams.
That's a really good point. It does seem like age is a bigger factor this season than anyone thought.
Yeah.
These young teams are playing with so much energy and athleticism.
Right.
I mean, are they just less worn down than some of these veteran teams?
I think that's part of it. The condensed schedule and the physicality of the game just seem to be taking a toll on those older players. But these younger teams are also just incredibly deep. I mean, look at the Cavs and the Thunder.
Yeah.
They're rolling out 10 or 11 guys deep every single night.
It's crazy.
And no one is overplaying. It's a completely different approach, and it's working for them in the regular season. But the big question is,
Will that depth be enough in the playoffs, though? When those rotations get shorter and the pressure ramps up?
that's the question, isn't it?
Can they keep up with the experience and then the star power of teams like the Lakers or the Warriors?
Well, that's a million-dollar question for sure. It's got to be one of the most interesting storylines this season. I mean, we've seen it before, right? Playoff basketball, it's a different animal.
Yeah.
Experience matters a lot. But maybe these young teams with their depth and their fearlessness, maybe they're changing the game. I don't know. It'll be fascinating to watch, though.
It really will. Speaking of changing the game, have you noticed how defense seems to be making a comeback this year? I mean, remember a few years ago when it was all about, small ball and just chucking up threes?
Yeah.
Now you look at the top teams, the Cavs, the Thunder, the Grizzlies, they're all about size, defense, physicality.
You're right. It's like the pendulum is swinging back the other way. And I think there's a couple things happening here. First, the new rules have made it tougher to score.
Really?
Yeah. It's not as easy to draw fouls, and teams are having a harder time generating offense in the half court.
So the rule changes are actually impacting how the game is played, like across the whole league.
Absolutely. And if you look at the numbers, offensive ratings are down everywhere. Teams are scoring fewer points.
Interesting.
It's a big shift. And then you have teams like the Nuggets and the Celtics who won championships playing defense first.
Right.
And you know what they say? The NBA is a copycat league. Teams see what works and they try to do the same thing.
So maybe size does matter after all, at least on defense. Makes you wonder if teams are going to start valuing big men and defensive stoppers again, like in the draft or free agency.
Good point. It'll be interesting to see if teams change how they build their rosters. Because of all this, if defense is really back in style, we might see a whole different type of player become valuable again.
All right, so let's look ahead to the second half of the season. The Spurs, unfortunately, with Wembanyama out, they're probably going to miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe they'll get lucky in the lottery again and get another top prospect.
They could. There's a really talented kid, Cooper Flagg. He's projected to be the #1 pick in the next draft.
Who's that?
6'8" wing, can do it all, score, defend, pass, rebound. Imagine him with a healthy Wembanyama.
Oh, man.
That would be something else.
That would be incredible. Okay, so you've got teams like the Thunder, the Cavs, and the Grizzlies. They all look like they could actually contend for a title. Could this be the year one of them actually breaks through and makes a deep playoff run?
I wouldn't bet against any of them. They're playing with so much confidence, and they've got the talent to compete with anyone. But don't sleep on the Warriors either.
Oh, yeah.
That Jimmy Butler trade was a big move. They could be dangerous in the playoffs.
The Warriors always seem to figure it out, right? But it's not just about the top teams. What about the teams that are underperforming? Like the Suns or the Sixers. Is there any chance those teams can turn things around in the second half?
It's not going to be easy, that's for sure. The Suns need to figure out their chemistry issues. They have a lot of talent, but it's just not working right now. And the Sixers, their whole season depends on Joel Embiid staying healthy.
Right.
He's been battling injuries, and they're just not the same team without him.
It's amazing how much one player can change a team's fortunes. Like, look at the Spurs with Wembanyama one injury, and their whole outlook changes.
Yeah, it's true. You can have all the talent in the world, but if your key players aren't on the court, it's tough to win in this league.
So as we head into the second half of the season, what are some of the things you're going to be watching? Besides, the stuff we've already talked about.
Well, the biggest question for me is, will this defense-first trend continue? Or are we going to see more of those high-scoring games? The rules have definitely had an impact, but will teams find a way to adjust and figure out how to score more?
That's interesting, and it's something that you, the listener, can watch for as the season goes on. Pay attention to how teams are playing offense. Are they just trying to isolate, or are they moving the ball and creating open shots?
Right, and also watch how teams are using their size and physicality. Are they trying to overpower teams and get to the basket? Or are we going to see more finesse and skill? It's all going to play out in the second half.
It's amazing how much the league changes from year to year. One year it's all about three-pointers and spacing, and the next year it's back to defense and being physical. Who knows what the next trend will be?
I know, right? That's the beauty of it, the unpredictability. It keeps you guessing, and it makes you want to keep watching.
For sure. Okay, so before we move on, let's go back to Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs for a minute.
Okay.
We talked about how his injury could be a blessing in disguise if they get Cooper Flagg in the draft. But is that really a sure thing? To rely on a rookie to save your franchise, even a highly touted one? That's a lot of pressure.
It is. There's no guarantee that Flagg will live up to the hype, but the Spurs are really good at developing players, and they've got Greg Popovich as their coach.
Right.
Who knows what they could do with a talent like Flagg?
That's true. Pop is the best at getting the most out of his players, but even with Pop's brilliance, is it realistic to think that the Spurs can build a contender around two young guys, even if they're as talented as Wembanyama and Flagg?
Well, it's a long shot, for sure. But remember, anything is possible in the NBA, and the Spurs have surprised people before.
Yeah, they have. So even though this season has been tough for Spurs fans, there's still reason to be optimistic about the future.
Absolutely. The future is bright in San Antonio. They've got Wembanyama and Fox. And if they can add someone like Flagg, they could be back in the championship conversation sooner than you think.
Now let's flip the script for a second. We've talked a lot about young 10-coming teams, but what about the teams that are having a rough time?
Yeah.
We mentioned the Suns and the Sixers. Are there any other teams that you think could be in for a tough second half of the season?
I think you got to keep an eye on the Clippers.
The Clippers.
They've been dealing with injuries all year, and they just haven't been able to find any consistency. They've got talent, but they're getting older, and they need everyone healthy if they want to make a run in the playoffs.
It's funny. You mentioned the Clippers being an older team. It seems like there's a real gap in the league right now between the older, more established teams and the younger, more athletic teams. Is that something you're noticing too?
Absolutely, and I think it's only going to become more pronounced in the next few years. The game's getting faster, more physical. It's just harder for older players to keep up. We're seeing more and more teams building around these young athletic cores. And I think that's the way to win in today's NBA.
So what does that mean for the future of the league? Are we going to see teams move away from this superstar-driven model?
It's tough to say for sure, but I think we're already starting to see that shift. Teams are starting to realize that depth and versatility are just as important as having a superstar. And with the new CBA making it harder to get multiple superstars, I think the league is going to be more balanced going forward.
So you're saying that the new rules could actually make the league more competitive?
I think it's definitely possible. It's going to force teams to be smarter about how they build their rosters, and it's going to give more teams a chance to compete, which is good for the league and good for the fans.
I totally agree. The more competitive the league is, the more exciting it is to watch. Speaking of excitement, let's talk about the playoffs. What are you most excited about as we head into the postseason?
Honestly, I'm just excited for the matchups. I want to see these young guns like the Thunder and the Grizzlies go up against the veterans like the Lakers and the Warriors. I want to see how the new rules change the playoff game, and I want to see if defense really does win championships.
I'm with you there, and I can't wait to see how it all unfolds. This second half of the season has been crazy, and I have a feeling the playoffs are going to be even wilder.
Yeah, buckle up.
All right, before we wrap things up, let's take a minute to go over everything we've talked about.
Sounds good.
We started with Victor Wembanyama's injury and what it means for the Spurs. Then we talked about the league as a whole, the new CBA rules, how the younger teams are outplaying the veterans, and the return of defense. We talked about the teams that are exceeding expectations, the teams that are struggle, and the teams that could have a big second half.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
It just shows you how dynamic and unpredictable the NBA is. There are so many different things that can impact a team's success, from individual talent to coaching to rule changes to just plain luck.
Right? It's all connected.
And for you, the listener, it's important to remember that all these things are connected to each other. The success of one team can impact other teams, how they play the value of certain players, and even the style of play across the league.
Exactly. It's like an ecosystem that's constantly changing. And it's fascinating to watch how it all works together.
So as we head into the second half of the season, pay attention to the little things, the changes in the game, the new trends, the moments that make you say, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Anything can happen.
You know, it's funny, we talk about the NBA as a business all the time, with all the talk about contracts and trades and salary caps. But at the end of the day, it's still a game.
Right.
Played by some of the most talented and passionate people in the world.
And sometimes I think we forget that these are real people out there playing this game.
Yeah.
They're giving it their all, pushing their bodies to the limit. They have hopes and dreams and fears, just like everyone else.
And they face adversity, too. We talked about Wembanyama's injury, but every single player in this league has their own battles they're fighting.
Right.
Whether it's injuries or self-doubt or the pressure to perform at such a high level.
It's true. And that's what makes their story so interesting. It's not just about winning or losing. It's about the journey, the ups and downs, the victories.
Yeah.
It's about the human spirit.
It's about those moments that are bigger than the game itself.
Exactly.
You know, like when a player overcomes a personal tragedy or finally achieves a dream they've had their whole life.
Those are the moments that connect us as fans.
Yeah.
The moments that remind us that sports are about more than just the final score.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
As you watch the rest of the season, don't just pay attention to the stats and the standings. Take some time to think about the individual stories.
Yeah.
The human side of it all. That's what makes the NBA so captivating.
Pay attention to the young guys coming into the league, the veterans trying to keep up the role players, making a difference in small ways.
Every player has a story to tell, and it's those stories, those individual journeys that make the NBA more than just a game.
It's a reflection of life itself.
It's kind of wild, right? We talked about the NBA as this big business.
Yeah.
You know, all the contracts and trades and salary caps.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's still a game, played by some incredibly talented people.
It's true. And sometimes I think we forget that these guys are human beings out there on the court. You know,
Yeah.
giving their all, pushing their bodies to the limit. They've got dreams and fears just like the rest of us.
And they face so much adversity. We talked about Wembanyama, but every player has their own battles they're dealing with.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Whether it's injuries or self-doubt or just the pressure of playing at that level.
Right. And that's what makes their story so interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just about the wins and losses. It's the journey, the struggles, the triumphs. You know, it's about the human spirit.
It's about those moments that are bigger than basketball.
Exactly. Like when a player comes back from something really tough, or when they finally achieve a dream they've had forever.
Right, those are the moments that connect us as fans.
For sure. They remind you that sports are about more than just who wins or losing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
As you watch the rest of the season, don't just focus on the standings and the stats. Take a minute to appreciate the individual stories, the human element. You know, that's what makes the NBA so special.
Yeah, pay attention to the young guys making a name for themselves, the veterans trying to hang on, the guys who might not be stars but are still making a difference.
Every player has a story to tell, and those stories, those individual journeys are what make the NBA more than just a game.
It's like a reflection of life.
And that's it for our deep dive on this crazy NBA season. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon to break down even more basketball action.